This exciting episode, Paul shoots his shot with our dowdy-turned-dandy defendant and gets shot out of the saddle. Plus, we bid David Gideon farewell. Good times all around. It's Perry Mason, Season 5, Episode 16, The Case of the Shapely Shadow. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose, pretty simple: provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel, if the episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and revel in a Perry proverb. That's a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. Before we head to the water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! Each episode in the law library, we examine a legal conundrum from the episode to find courtroom precedents for future cases. This episode's legal lesson involves the thorny question of when a secretary can legally open an employer's suitcase. Janice Wainwright is suspicious that her boss's loaded suitcase contains blackmail money, so she gets Perry to open it.
Miss Street tells me that you work for a man named Morley Tillman.
Yes, I've been with him 6 years.
And that you're worried about him and that you need a lawyer's advice.
Well, I'd like to know if I can legally open that suitcase.
Well, that might depend on to whom the suitcase belongs.
Oh, it belongs to Mr. Tillman, and it's locked.
We ask, was this consultation legally necessary? Under California law in 1962, opening someone else's sealed container without permission could constitute the following crimes: theft by embezzlement, invasion of privacy, and breach of fiduciary duty. However, there are important exceptions when an employee reasonably believes they are preventing a crime by opening the sealed container. California's Civil Code Section 47 provides protection for communications made to law enforcement or attorneys about suspected illegal activity. In this case, Janice had legitimate reasons to suspect criminal activity: a torn-up blackmail note, instructions involving suspicious behavior with cash, and a delivery method, a locker with a key, that suggested illicit activity. By consulting Perry, Janice protected herself legally by documenting her good faith belief that she was preventing a crime, obtaining legal counsel before breaching privacy, and creating a record of her intentions. And my takeaway: it's never wrong to consult Perry. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Shapely Shadow. Let's meet the players. Janice Wainwright, a secretary who hides her beauty.
Is Mr. Tillman married?
Yes, he's been married nearly 4 years now.
Happily?
Why, I think so, but what does that have to do with...
Well, if Mrs. Tillman is young, perhaps she's also jealous. Are you afraid that if you wore the right lipstick, she might notice you?
I'm afraid she might get me fired, yes. But I'm not in love with Mr. Tillman, if that's what you're trying to suggest.
Morley T., a businessman who seems like a selfish dolt, but has tons of women throwing themselves at him.
Janice, I want you to go... The devil are you doing here?
Well, I was,
Beat it, Fred. She has work to do.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna learn how to handle men. You know what he's like.
Carlotta T., the first Mrs. Morley, who lost her man when she got possessive and put on weight. But now she's slim, trim, and holding some valuable stock. Where you at, Morley?
Well, I guess there has been a little improvement since we last saw each other. About 40 pounds of it, in fact.
Agnes T., a.k.a. Lady of the Night, day dawns. A provocative hat-wearing wife number 2 to Morley, who's found her sugar daddy.
I know my husband. He divorced his first wife, Carlotta, because she wouldn't let him out of her sight. She wouldn't leave him alone. And she let herself go till she looked like an absolute barrel. Well, I've tried not to make any of the same mistakes.
And finally, Cole Troy, Bakersville's very own, an investment partner of Morley Teas.
Your boss still busy, Janice?
Yes, he is, Mr. Troy. But if you're expecting to have lunch with him,
Oh, no, never mind. I've got to get back to Bakersfield anyway.
Our story begins with Morley all aflutter. Janice tries to calm him down, but no dice. Then Morley asks for a suitcase.
Oh, Janice, I want you to buy me a suitcase.
A suitcase? Oh, Mr. Tealman, what's wrong? If you just tell me so I could help.
Oh, now, Janice, don't look at me like that. I'm not going anyplace. I'm not running away or anything. I just need a suitcase.
Yes, sir. A suitcase.
Janice goes to Perry. Perry makes her pay the requisite dollar retainer and opens the case. What does he find?
Oh, my good heavens.
All $20 bills.
There must be over $100,000 there.
Perry helps Janice document the contents and then has Della help Janice put the suitcase in the train depot. Well, Morley disappears. Agnes reports it to the police, and yikes, all that money vamooses too. Perry thinks he might catch Janice down Vegas way, and he does, meeting Carlotta and her younger brother Henry in the process. Anywho, Perry confronts Janice just in time to have the police show up with some dreadful news.
Do you know those men?
Well, Track, what are you doing in Nevada?
Probably the same thing you are, Perry. I want to ask this young lady some questions concerning the murder of her employer, Mr. Morley L. Tealman.
Morley's body is discovered in Palmdale. The blackmail wasn't blackmail. Morley was working on a business deal, but someone made a deal with him with murder. And partner Troy says it was someone sporting a, wait for it, shapely shadow.
Well, the only other person on the sidewalk was someone over past the corner. Nothing more than a shadow, really. Then I noticed she must have been waiting, because she walked after him and then she disappeared too.
She? Could you recognize her? Describe her?
Well, I couldn't see her face. But you know how it is. A pretty young thing walking across the street. You know, a man's never too old.
Hamburger builds what seems like an airtight case against Janice. She had access to the money. Tire tracks place her car at the scene of the crime, and witnesses suggest a romantic relationship with her boss. Perry's cross-examinations chip away at the prosecution's timeline. The medical examiner can't pin down the exact time of death.
Did you say many a so-called expert has been trapped into errors of as much as 24 hours by unusual conditions of one thing?
I was talking about exact times, Mr. Mason.
Did you write that article?
Yes.
And that shapely shadow Cole Troy claims he saw following Morley? Well, Perry exposes how Troy's own wandering eyes make his testimony suspect.
In other words, while a good-looking young woman with a figure you've described as distinctive and shapely was crossing the street, you kept your eyes 10 feet ahead of her.
No, I didn't mean that. I looked back and forth at both of them. Naturally, I must have.
And don't forget Otis Campbell, witness for the prosecution.
Exhibit 10 is the impression of the track in that mud. Exhibit 11 is an impression which I made at the police laboratory using the right front tire of the defendant's car.
That's Hal Smith talking about tire tracks. But it's Perry who spins something I've never seen before. A closing argument from the man, where he methodically demonstrates how every piece of evidence could be explained by someone taking Janice's car while she was getting made over from rags to riches in the beauty parlor. The clincher? A garden hose?
Notice the hose. The hose attached to a water faucet in front of the house. A brand new hose, ladies and gentlemen. Left at a house which hadn't been used for over a year. All the murderer needed to do was to drive the defendant's car up there, drive it into the dirt.
When Berger tries to rebut this theory by claiming the water was shut off, Perry springs his trap. The water company record shows service was restored. At whose request?
It was billed to Mr. Cole B. Troy of Bakersfield.
Troy confesses. J'accuse!
I did it. I killed him.
In our final scene, Paul tries to get his Mac on with Janice.
Janice, suppose you and I go to dinner. I know a lovely little restaurant down at the beach, and after that...
But she's decided to pursue a relationship with someone closer to her age. Young brother Henry Battle.
Hi, Janice. You ready to go?
Yes, Henry, I'm ready to go. Would you excuse us? Goodbye, Mr. Mason, and thanks again.
Bye, folks.
And that explains that.
Nice try, Paul. For the first time this season, we have an episode based on a novel. This 1962 episode is based on the 1960 Earl Stanley Gardner novel of the same name. It's a fun one, well worth reading. Here are 7 differences. Number 1, as with most ESG books, the whole thing is in third-person limited point of view, focused on Perry. We open with Perry, we end with Perry. Number 2, Perry and Della make time for Janice because she's so obviously hiding her beauty. That's the shtick from the word go. Janice actually admits having some romantic interludes with Morley between wife number 1 and wife number 2. According to Della, Janice is playing the long game with the hope of being wife number 3, wants gold digging Agnes, seeks greener pastures. Number 3, Morley is 38 years old in the book. We never actually see him in a scene. George Neese, who portrays Morley in the show, was in his mid-40s when he portrayed Morley. Slightly older. Number 4, lots more Agnes, aka wife number 2, in the book. There's an extended tete-a-tete with Perry early in the novel and a lovely Perry cross-examination session with her during the trial. It exposes her sad widow routine as a farce. She's a gold digger, a young, super attractive Las Vegas shill who hit on men in casinos to get them to spend more money. She's something approaching a call girl, and Perry shows her up. Number 5, no Fred Carlisle in the book. Fred Carlisle is the guy who looks like the younger brother of Tommy Noonan, and there's no Henry Battle, younger brother of Carlotta, either. Number 6, Perry rarely, if ever, elicits a confession in the courtroom in the novels. It holds here. The post-case debriefing is necessary in the novels because there's only the fact of the defendant's innocence that gets established rather than the true guilty party's confession. And number 7, a huge piece of evidence hammering Perry was a $20 bill he allegedly gave a cabbie in Vegas that turned out to be part of the fake blackmail money. Oh, I should add, there's a scene where Perry and Della gamble. The end of the novel concerns Perry explaining how the bill wasn't from him, but from Carlotta. And of course, all that got cut for the episode. And needless to say, there's no David Gideon in the novel. Did you notice how he didn't even make it into my plot summary, even when it would make sense for him to be the potential love interest of Janice? I kind of think that's why they cut his character. Alas, poor Carl Held, we knew him well. We'll always have your tenuous grasp of maritime law in your poorly designed power of attorney documents. Fare thee well, David, and may flights of angels sing thee to thy bar exam. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the episode. And finally, a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode concerns the weight of money. All that cash in a suitcase got us wondering, just how heavy would $100,000 in $20 bills be? Hint, I have a feeling that the answer to this question would be different pre-1970 and post-1970. Time to do some detective work, Pauls. Get detecting! Our Della for this episode focuses on Barbara Lawrence, she of the Playful Hats.
Yes, Mr. Berger, I knew perfectly well that Janice Wainwright was in love with my husband.
Here's 10 about Babs. Number 1, born Barbara Jo Lawrence, February 24th, 1930, Carnegie, Oklahoma, a direct descendant of Francis Eaton, who came to America on the Mayflower, destined for showbiz from the start, won a tiny tot beauty contest at age 3, began modeling at age 5. Number 2, moved to California at age 10 with her mother and was crowned Little Miss Hollywood in 1942. Number 3, big break came in 1946's Margie, where she played Jean Crane's best friend, establishing her career pattern of playing the leading lady's confidant or rival. Number 4, 1949, made waves in Hollywood with roles in A Letter to Three Wives and Thieves Highway, and ran her own insurance agency in LA. Number 5, 1950s, well, there's the memorable Gertie Cummings role in Oklahoma and a leading role in the cult sci-fi film Kronos. She had screen tests for 2 major roles that went to other actresses. Jean Hagen's role in Singin' in the Rain and Shelley Winters' Oscar-winning role in A Place in the Sun. Number 6, appeared in 4 episodes of Perry Mason between 58 and 62. She was Tick Barton's wife. You'll remember that episode from season 2. And this was her last episode on the show. Number 7, her romantic life reads like a Hollywood script. Dated Howard Hughes, Ronald Reagan, Mickey Rooney, Robert Wagner. Number 8, transition from acting in the mid-1960s. Quote, I realized that acting was degrading me. My parts were either smaller or worse or both. It was no longer the career life I first thought it was. It wasn't even an interesting one, end quote. Another humdinger of a quotation from her on aging stars she grew up with. Quote, many of them were stars, not just promising people like myself. They made wonderful films in their heyday. Now I see them in what I think is just junk. Maybe they need the money. It just hurts me to see them destroy the images they created, close quote. Not true of Barbara Lawrence. She became an author, a publicist for LA's bicentennial celebration, and ultimately a successful Beverly Hills real estate agent. Number 9, married 3 times. First to actor Jeffrey Stone, also known as John Fontaine, then to baseball player Johnny Murphy, and finally to stockbroker Lester Nelson. She had 4 children who became her primary focus after she left acting. She divorced Nelson in the mid-70s and stayed single until her death. Number 10, passed away from kidney failure in November 2013 at age 83. Her family delayed announcing her death until the next year because her youngest son was recovering from a serious mountain biking accident. Our pairing for this episode concerns the on-the-lips kiss he receives in the denouement from Janice Wainwright. While our hero occasionally receives grateful pecks on the cheek, we've seen him receive a kiss from Della, from Sherry Chichi. The lip lock stands out. And the Perry-Della dynamic, for those of you who are wondering, would simmer for decades before we finally saw those two kiss on the lips in the 1993 made-for-TV movie, The Case of the Telltale Talk Show Host. Talk about playing the long game. Our theme for this episode, shadows. Yes, there's Cole Troy's eyewitness account of a shapely shadow following Morley T, but the deeper shadows are metaphorical. Janice Wainwright lives in the shadow of suspicion cast by her role as an attractive secretary, purposefully hiding her looks to stay close to a married man. Carlotta T withered while she lived in the shadow of day dawns. And then there's Cole Troy and Morley T, themselves pretty shady operators. Suitcases of cash? Come on now. Perry Mason, as always, serves as a light source, cutting through the shadows with the illuminating power of truth. Now it's time for a Perry Proverb. Our Perry Proverb for this episode involves our man giving Janice advice that runs counter to his usual proverbial ways.
Janice, you're simply going to have to tell them what you know.
Throughout the series, Perry typically advises clients to keep quiet. Let him do the talking. He could practically trademark, "Don't volunteer anything." But here, facing a mountain of circumstantial evidence, Perry recognizes sometimes silence itself can cast the darkest shadow. Now, it's worth noting that Perry ultimately finds another way to victory without having Janice testify. But in an episode that saw our man actually give a closing argument, this counter character advice is the real keeper. Now, let's head to the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Every time we visit the water cooler, we give you deleted scenes. 3 bits that didn't quite make the episode's final cut. Number 1, after spending hours recording serial numbers from $20 bills, Della proposes a new office policy. All future blackmail payments must be made in $100 bills. Perry says no, he likes singles better. Number 2, the beauty parlor where Janice spends her alibi day specializes post-case in shapely shadow styling. Their signature look involves teasing hair into mysterious silhouettes that can be mistaken for Hollywood celebrities. Number 3, after Janice shoots him down, Paul joins David and they hit the local night scene. David runs into Judy Bryant, who's nursing a broken heart post-Neil Gilbert. The pair hit it off, eloped to Vegas that same night, and Paul's left alone again, naturally. Cue the Gilbert O'Sullivan. Our Paul prompt from the last episode, The Case of the Roving River, involved California rivers and changing boundaries. Our crack team of Paul investigators came through with some fascinating findings, and my PI delivered a comprehensive report highlighting several key waterways. Her most intriguing discovery concerned the LA River. After the devastating 1938 flood, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers literally poured concrete over the problem, channelizing the river and creating a whole new set of property disputes. Some landowners found themselves suddenly landlocked. She also uncovered the dramatic story of the Salton Sea's creation in 1905, when engineering failures caused the Colorado River to flood the Salton Sink, submerging thousands of acres of farmland and spawning decades of litigation. Dad Drake also found out about the Colorado River with its meandering and flooding in the Imperial Valley, leading to disputes over boundaries, and the Feather River, which was involved in disputes regarding gold mining and irrigation. Quote, damming created conflicts downstream, end quote. Lovely line. He also threw in another punny gem about the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. The change in both left behind, quote, a sediment of bedrock case law, end quote. Nice wordplay, Daddy-o. The key legal principle both investigators identified: the distinction between accretion, that's gradual change, and avulsion, sudden shifts. Now, let's hear a quick listener letter. In addition to her Paul prompt response, Aunt Mai had these thoughts on the case of the Roving River. Quote, I saw a Hungarian cowboy ride while standing on two separate horses, she said, referring to the fact that Harry Carey Jr. was able to do that. Harry Carey Jr. had an interesting life, she remarks. I like that they called him Dobie. I'm sad to see David Gideon's appearances are coming to an end, close quote. All things must pass, Aunt Mai. I believe it was George Harrison who taught us that. Either him or the preacher in Ecclesiastes. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a comment on the episode or the pod in general? Why don't you drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. Next time, Perry finds himself navigating treacherous waters when a family dispute over a shipping company turns deadly. Perry will need all hands on deck to find the truth. It's the case of the captain's coins. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue bait!